It was an early winter evening in Houston. Cold winds swept through the empty streets, casting long shadows across cracked sidewalks. On the main road of an aging neighborhood, the sign for Lone Star Smokehouse flickered with red and green neon lights, reflecting in rain puddles that hadn't yet dried. Nathan Brooks, 58 years old, stood frozen under the street lamp, clutching his old baseball cap so tightly that his fingertips had turned white. He didn't know how long he had been standing there. Every time the wind blew, the familiar smell of hickory-smoked barbecue from the kitchen made his stomach tighten, a painful reminder that something was slowly dying inside the very dream he had built his entire life. 20 years ago, he had started with an old barbecue truck, grilling each piece of meat by hand, smiling at every customer. Lone Star Smokehouse had become a home, a place where he believed in the goodness between people. Yet now, that very restaurant was drowning under the cold judgment of one-star reviews' rude staff. Customers left unattended. Took 40 minutes to get our food, no apologies. Cash tips went missing, and the staff just looked at me with fear. Those words pierced deeper into Nathan's heart than any business failure ever had. He had once believed that good food and a genuine heart were enough to keep things afloat. But tonight, for the first time in 20 years, he felt fear. Fear that he had allowed something terrible to happen inside the home he had built. Fear that the trust he had placed in people he believed in had been betrayed. And above all, fear of the helplessness he felt as he watched his staff, the people who relied on every single tip and every smile left behind by customers, wither away, drained by something silently stealing their hard-earned wages. That night, Nathan decided to do something he never thought he would go undercover to investigate his own restaurant. He pulled his cap low, adjusted the fake beard he had hastily bought from a corner costume shop, then took a deep breath before crossing the street toward the familiar wooden door of Lone Star Smokehouse. The bell above the door jingled as it opened, but tonight it didn't feel like a warm welcome. It sounded like a warning, ringing softly in Nathan's chest, signaling that a long night was waiting. He stepped into the air heavy with barbecue smoke and spices, weaving his way between old wooden tables, discreetly observing each staff member's face, each customer's smile, and every move of the people he once called family. He had no idea that in just a few hours he would hear words he would never forget for the rest of his life, and that tonight Lone Star Smokehouse would never be the same again. Stepping past the heavy wooden door scented with hickory smoke, Nathan lowered his head to avoid direct eye contact with those who used to know him. He chose a small table near the kitchen, where the dim yellow light above cast a glow over the worn dark wood, scratches marking the remnants of stories that had once unfolded there. Lone Star Smokehouse was lively that Friday night, with groups of customers laughing, plates of ribs steaming, and glasses of beer clinking. But within the liveliness, Nathan sensed something was wrong, a quiet tension weaving itself among the staff. His eyes settled on Cassie Grant, the new manager in her early 30s, tall and thin, her blonde hair tied up perfectly. On her black button-down shirt was a shiny name tag that read, Cassie, Manager. Cassie moved through the restaurant like a wolf on the hunt, her smile bright but her eyes cold, watching tables where customers paid in cash with an unsettling focus. From time to time, she stood near the checkout, her hand on the shoulder of a young server fumbling with receipts, her lips smiling but never quite curling up, her eyes flicking over the stack of small cash tips with razor-sharp speed. Nathan ducked lower, adjusting his cap, pretending to fiddle with his phone, but he never took his eyes off Cassie. He saw how she always hovered near tables that customers had just left, her eyes scanning quickly across the table before stepping lightly, like a cat, checking under napkins and beside sauce bottles. And sometimes her hand would sweep over the table, snatching up a bill and slipping it swiftly into her apron pocket. He once thought the one-star reviews were due to a lack of staff spirit, but now he understood it was the draining of hope that had killed their smiles. Nathan saw Linda Parker, a veteran server nearing 50, bending over to wipe down a table, her thin shoulders trembling slightly as she checked each corner, her hands shaking as she picked up a fallen napkin, her eyes darting around as if searching for something that had been lost. He watched as Linda walked over to the counter, pulling a piece of paper from her apron, staring at the numbers, then lifting her head to look at Cassie, who stood a few steps away, arms crossed, eyes indifferent. Linda opened her mouth to say something, but Cassie only smirked, nodding coldly before turning her back, leaving Linda standing there with empty, confused, and pained eyes. Nathan felt like his heart was being crushed. He couldn't hear the conversation, but he knew that Linda had just lost a tip. It might have only been $10 or $20, but for Linda, that could have been dinner, medicine for her elderly mother, or the hope of surviving another week. Fragmented conversations floated around Nathan. I'm sure they left cash. Cassie said the customer probably took it back. It's the third time this week. It can't be. Lone Star Smokehouse was no longer a family. It had become a gold mine for the greedy, and Cassie was extracting every last dollar with the precision of someone who had done it countless times before. Nathan took a sip of water, trying to steady himself, but the once mouth-watering smell of barbecue now felt like it was choking him. Every stolen dollar was blood, sweat, and the hope of those who had trusted Lone Star Smokehouse trusted him. That night, he realized a harsh truth. If this didn't stop, Lone Star Smokehouse would die, and everything he believed in would be buried with it. But he didn't yet know that within just a few hours he would hear a sentence from Cassie's own mouth that would freeze him in place, making him realize that this fight wasn't just to save a restaurant, it was to protect the dignity of people whose voices were being stolen in silence. Around 8 p.m., peak hour at Lone Star Smokehouse, the clatter of forks and knives mixed with the cheerful laughter of customers. In the kitchen, the air was thick with hickory smoke, barbecue sauce, and spices, suffocating yet familiar. Nathan sat in the corner, tilting his ear, his eyes never leaving Cassie as she walked into the kitchen, tucking her hair neatly behind her ear, a brief smile crossing her face as she spotted Marcus, the large, sweaty head chef flipping ribs on the grill. Cassie stood next to Marcus, her voice loud enough for Nathan to hear over the sizzling fat dripping onto the fire. Marcus, do you know what I love most about Friday nights? Marcus glanced at her, still flipping the meat, exhaustion clear in his eyes. No, Cassie, I'm busy. Cassie chuckled, a light breeze of a laugh but cold as ice, leaning closer, lowering her voice so only Marcus could hear. But Nathan caught every word. Cash. Marcus. No receipts, no traces. Customer tips, straight into management's pocket. Easy. And no one suspects a thing. Marcus gripped the tongs tighter, his eyes shifting between the grill and Cassie. Cassie, you know this isn't right. They rely on those tips to pay rent, to feed their kids. Cassie's face darkened, her smile disappearing, her eyes turning sharp. What are you saying? Marcus tips are a privilege, not a right. They already get their hourly wage. We, the ones keeping this place running, deserve the rest. Her smile returned, but this time it was twisted and empty. Come on, Marcus, don't act like some saint. Do you really think Nathan Brooks knows or cares about this? He's in his air-conditioned office, never showing up. As long as the restaurant makes money, who's going to care? Those words were like an icy knife driving straight into Nathan's chest. He felt like he couldn't breathe. Outside, customers were still laughing, savoring the famous BBQ ribs, unaware that rot was festering inside this kitchen. Marcus shook his head, his voice hoarse. I don't agree. I can't keep pretending not to see. Cassie shrugged, squinting her eyes. Suit yourself, but don't forget who controls your timesheet. Marcus, who sends reports up to Nathan Brooks's office. Marcus fell silent, his face darkening like the charcoal beneath the grill. Nathan placed a hand on his chest, feeling his heart pounding violently. He had hoped the negative reviews were just misunderstandings, that it was new staff still learning, that it was just picky customers. But now, he knew it was all true. Cassie walked out of the kitchen, her eyes scanning the restaurant, pausing briefly on Nathan's table. His heart skipped a beat, but Cassie simply gave a polite smile before turning away, never realizing that the man sitting there was the owner of Lone Star Smokehouse. He saw Linda, wearing her worn apron, hurrying toward a table that had just been vacated. A $20 bill tip was left on the table. Linda's face lit up, and she quickened her pace. But Cassie was already there, appearing out of nowhere, swiftly picking up the bill, tucking it between the receipt, smiling as she said, "I'll handle this." Linda froze, the smile vanishing from her face. She opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something, but then closed it, bowing her head as she walked away, her shoulders trembling lightly. Nathan watched Linda, feeling a painful helplessness rise in his throat. He remembered the early days when Linda first started working, how bright her smile was, how warmly she greeted customers, the pride in her eyes when she earned a tip for serving customers well. Tonight, that light in her eyes was replaced only by fear and despair. Nathan clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms until blood broke the skin. But he didn't feel the physical pain. All he knew was that he could no longer sit still. But he also knew that anger alone would not be enough. He needed evidence. He needed the truth. And he needed to protect people like Linda, people who had spent their youth building the very soul of Lone Star Smokehouse. The Houston night slid deeper into the late hours. as the warm lights inside Lone Star Smokehouse cast a golden glow on the wooden tables, reflecting in the tired eyes of the staff, quietly clearing away glasses of water and plates of leftover food. Linda Parker wiped down the last table in her section. She lifted her eyes to the clock on the wall, the minute hand ticking past 10:15. She had been on her feet for 8 straight hours, her legs numb, sharp pain shooting through her knees, worn down by years of standing. But Linda did not allow herself to rest, could not afford to. In the pocket of her apron, she gently smoothed out the small bills she had collected in tips that night, $8, $5, a few coins that jingled softly with every step she took. Her eyes dimmed as she thought of the electric bill on her kitchen counter back at her old apartment, printed with the words, "Disconnection Notice." Linda had planned to pay it off this week, but with only $67 from last week, that had become an unrealistic hope from his hidden corner. Nathan watched every small gesture Linda made, the yellow light casting shadows across her thin face and hollow cheeks, her grey eyes trying hard to remain focused. He saw her carefully straighten each bottle of barbecue sauce, wipe off stains from the table, align the chairs perfectly, then sigh softly, lowering her shoulders as if she were carrying an invisible weight. But the moment that broke Nathan's heart was when a young family stood up from a table near the door, their child waving goodbye to Linda, giggling, while the father left a $20 bill tucked beneath the hot sauce bottle. Linda hurried over, a glimmer of a smile lighting up her eyes. Her hand trembled as she reached for that $20 bill, as if touching a small piece of hope for tomorrow's meal. But Cassie was already there, arms crossed, eyes flicking down at the bill, a fake smile stretching across her face. "I'll take care of that for you, Linda." Linda froze, her hand hovering over the bill, her eyes meeting Cassie's, and the light in them went out. She wanted to say something, to keep that hard-earned tip, but her lips only quivered before closing. Cassie picked up the bill, folded it neatly, slipped it into the receipt book, and patted Linda on the shoulder. "Don't worry, everything is being managed carefully." With that, Cassie turned around, her heels clicking rhythmically on the wooden floor, leaving Linda standing there alone, her eyes brimming with tears, her trembling hand pulling back, hiding in her apron as if afraid someone might see. Nathan bit his lip until it bled, his hand gripping the plastic water cup so tightly it cracked. He watched as Linda quietly retreated to a corner, sitting down on a small chair near the kitchen, her hands clasped together, her face turned up toward the ceiling as she took a deep breath, trying to keep the tears from falling. But she couldn't hold them back. The first tear rolled down her thin cheek, dropping to the tiled floor, shattering like the fragile hope it carried. In that moment, Nathan saw everything Lone Star Smokehouse once stood for: being strangled, the genuine smiles of the staff, the kindness of the customers, the faith in a fair workplace. All of it was being crushed by someone greedy like Cassie, one small tip at a time, tips that for Linda could have meant medicine for her mother, a box of milk for her grandchild, or the electricity that would keep the lights on tomorrow. Linda stood up, wiped her tears, adjusted her apron, took a deep breath, and walked back to the register, bowing her head to greet the next group of customers with a forced smile. That was the final drop that broke the dam in Nathan's heart. He understood that if he continued to stay silent, to remain the absent owner in his air-conditioned office, not only Linda, but every single one of his employees would continue to be exploited until they were drained dry, leaving Lone Star Smokehouse empty of its soul. But he also knew if he wanted to save Lone Star Smokehouse, if he wanted to save Linda, he couldn't just get angry. He needed evidence. He needed the truth. And he would do it for Linda, for every person who had trusted him, and for the dream he had spent his entire life building. The Houston night had passed midnight, but inside Lone Star Smokehouse, the yellow lights still shone on the worn tile floors, reflecting the shadows of the tired staff as they cleaned the last few tables. Linda stood at the register, her eyes staring intently at the numbers flashing on the screen. Each dollar appeared, then vanished as Cassie stepped over, glancing at the register, jotting something down in her thick black notebook. Linda swallowed hard, her shoulders shaking slightly. In her mind, she saw her mother lying under an oxygen mask in their small rented room, prescription bills stacked in a pile, her mother's cloudy eyes still managing a gentle smile. "Don't worry about me, honey. Just keep working. I'll be fine." Linda knew her mother was not fine, and she knew that the $20 tip Cassie had just taken was supposed to be her mother's dinner tomorrow, the blood pressure medication her mother would need when the night came. Linda's worn-out shoes shuffled across the floor as she stepped into the small break room, where the fluorescent light flickered above, the walls plastered with old notices and a time-card board stained with greasy fingerprints. On a rickety wooden chair, Jaime, the 22-year-old new waitress, sat with her head down, messy brown hair falling over her shoulders, her eyes red and swollen. Linda sat down beside her, gently placing a hand on Jaime's shoulder. "What's wrong?" "Honey." Jaime lifted her head, eyes glistening with tears. They left a tip for me, Miss Linda. A sweet family. They told me I did a great job. They said they would leave a little tip. I saw them leave it. But when I came back to clear the table, it was gone." Linda squeezed Jaime's shoulder, feeling the young woman's body shaking. The look in Jaime's eyes was the same look Linda saw in her own reflection each night. "I need that money to pay this week's rent. If I don't, they'll lock the door, and I'll have nowhere to go." Linda looked into Jaime's eyes and saw her own younger self, saw how hope had been worn down by greedy hands and silent theft. Linda took a deep breath and made a decision she had never dared to make before. "Listen to me, Jaime. We can't stay silent anymore." Jaime's eyes widened. "But Cassie will fire us. She said she'll report anyone who questions her." Linda shook her head softly, her voice trembling but firm. "If we don't speak up, if we don't stand up, they'll keep taking everything from us, dollar by dollar, smile by smile." The door swung open and Cassie stepped into the break room, holding her black notebook, her eyes sweeping over Linda and Jaime. That cold smile returned to her face, colder than ever. "Linda, I need to speak with you." Linda stood up, looking Cassie directly in the eyes, for the first time, not bowing, not looking away. "I need to speak with you too, Cassie." Cassie raised an eyebrow, her smile thin. About what? Linda clenched her fists, took a deep breath, and met Cassie's eyes firmly. About the tips you've been taking. For a moment, the room fell completely silent, the ticking of the wall clock echoing, counting each slow second. Cassie smirked, dropping her black notebook onto the table. Do you have proof? Linda felt her knees shaking, her palms cold with sweat. But she did not back down. I don't need proof to know the truth. I saw what you did. I heard what you said in the kitchen. Cassie let out a cold laugh, stepping closer until there was only half a step between them, her voice low and sharp. I'd advise you to keep quiet, Linda. Otherwise, I can make you disappear from here, just like I did with the others. Linda felt her heart pounding, but her eyes never wavered, shining with a fearless resolve. You can take my job away, Cassie, but you can't take the truth. For the first time, the smile on Cassie's lips disappeared completely, her cold eyes flickering briefly. But Cassie quickly turned away, her voice like a blade. You'll regret opening your mouth today. Cassie walked out, slamming the door behind her, leaving Linda standing there, her chest heaving, her hands still shaking. Jaime grabbed Linda's hand, her eyes wet but holding a glimmer of hope. You're so brave, Miss Linda. Linda turned to Jaime, smiling, tears still shining in her eyes. It's not bravery, honey. It's just that at some point, when you have nothing left to lose, you stand up for what's right. Linda didn't know that in that very moment. Nathan was standing outside the break room door, having heard every word she said, seeing her trembling shoulders, seeing a Linda who no longer bowed her head, who no longer stayed silent. He knew this was the moment that would change everything. Nathan stood silently outside the break room, his shadow blending into the yellow light spilling from the flickering tube light, his hand gripping the edge of the wooden counter until his knuckles turned white. Every word Linda spoke, every tear on her cheek, every quiver in her voice as she looked Cassie in the eye. Each felt like a knife cutting deep into Nathan's heart. He once thought he was a good boss. He once believed that as long as he paid fair wages, the employees would be fine and everything would run on its own. But in this very moment, he realized his absence had turned Lone Star Smokehouse into a place where people like Linda were being exploited for their kindness. The break room door swung open, and Nathan quickly stepped back into the shadows. Cassie walked out, still holding her black notebook, her face cold, eyes scanning the area with suspicion. Her high heels clicked rhythmically on the floor, each sound sharp in the quiet restaurant, now nearly empty. Linda walked out behind Cassie, quietly wiping away the tear still clinging to her cheek, taking a deep breath, adjusting her apron before walking toward the register to finish her shift for the night. But as Linda placed her hand on the cash register, Cassie turned back, striding straight toward her, a fierce glint in her eyes. Linda, I told you to keep your mouth shut. Linda looked at Cassie, her voice hoarse but steady. I'm not afraid of you. Cassie, you have no right to take the hard-earned money we worked for. Cassie twisted her lips into a crooked smile, tilting her head. Right, Linda. Who do you think you are here? You're just an old hag wiping tables and giving fake smiles to customers for a few measly tips." Linda trembled, her hands clenching together, but her eyes no longer held fear. "I am a human being, Cassie, and those tips, I earned them fair and square." Cassie slammed her hand down on the counter, the loud crack making Linda flinch and causing Nathan in the shadows to clench his jaw. "I am so sick of your pathetic act, Linda. You think Nathan Brooks would believe someone like you? I've been sending him reports for months, telling him about your so-called lack of professionalism, your slowness, those fake customer complaints. You really think he's going to take your side?" Linda froze. Her eyes flickered, staring into empty space, her breath shallow, as if someone had punched her in the chest. Cassie leaned in, her mouth close to Linda's ear, her voice cold as steel. "You are nothing here. You're a burden. And if you open your mouth one more time, I will make sure you can't find work in this city ever again." Linda gripped the edge of the counter to steady herself. But then she lifted her head, her eyes red, wrinkles deepening on her face. But within those eyes, a fierce determination shone. "I can't stay silent anymore, Cassie, not anymore." Cassie scoffed, turning away, leaving Linda standing there, her chest rising and falling. From across the room, Jaime saw it happening, starting to walk over, but Linda raised her hand to stop her, pressing her lips together, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. But no one heard her cry. Nathan leaned against the wooden wall, his heart heavy. He knew the feeling of despair when you're pushed to the edge, the fear in your eyes when you're threatened with losing the little you have left. He had lived it when he was just a man selling barbecue on the street, sleeping in his old truck during the freezing winters, saving every penny to buy a new grill. And he knew that if he didn't act, Lone Star Smokehouse would cease to be Lone Star Smokehouse. It would become an empty name, a place where the greedy, like Cassie, used power to drain the hope from people like Linda and Jaime, stuffing their bottomless pockets with stolen dreams. Nathan stepped out from the shadows, leaving the restaurant in silence, stepping into the sharp cold of the Houston night, the yellow streetlights casting his long shadow across the rain-wet road, his hand clenched, nails digging into his palms until they bled. But Nathan felt no pain. He felt something else fire, a quiet fire igniting inside him, the fire of justice, of protecting the people who had trusted him, and of reclaiming the soul of Lone Star Smokehouse. Tonight, Nathan knew what he needed to do, and Cassie would never see the storm coming from the very owner she had underestimated. The Houston night grew colder as Nathan stepped out of Lone Star Smokehouse, his breath mingling with the thin mist over the damp road, raindrops glistening under the dim streetlights. He opened the door to his old pickup truck, sitting in the driver's seat, his hands resting on the steering wheel without starting the engine. His eyes stared straight through the windshield, but in his mind he saw Linda's face, her red eyes filled with determination, her trembling but firm voice, "I can't stay silent anymore, Cassie. Not anymore." Nathan's chest tightened. He remembered Cassie's cold, confident, dismissive look as she threatened Linda. He remembered the way she stepped over those tip dollars as if they meant nothing, as if the people who had earned them were just tools under her feet. And then he remembered the early days when he sold barbecue from his old cart, flipping ribs while smiling at customers. Each tip he received was hope for tomorrow, hope for opening a small restaurant, hope for the Lone Star Smokehouse dream. Nathan lowered his hand, picked up his phone, and called David Miller, his friend and right hand for 15 years. "David, I need you to come to the office right now." David's sleepy voice came over the line. "Boss, it's almost midnight. What's going on?" Nathan took a deep breath. "Lone Star is in danger. I've let this happen for too long. And tonight, I saw it with my own eyes." There was a pause, and then David's voice came back, now awake and sharp. "I'm on my way." Nathan started the engine, pulling out of the parking lot, the tires rolling over the rain-slick road, carrying the burning determination within him. About an hour later, at the Lone Star Smokehouse headquarters, located on the 3rd floor of an old red brick building in downtown Houston, the lights glowed through the glass windows into the dark night. David walked in, his jacket still wet from the rain, hair dripping, but his eyes were focused. "Boss, what's happening?" Nathan sat behind the desk. In front of him, a laptop and a thick notebook filled with his handwritten notes. "David, I need all the security footage from the main branch for the last 3 months. I need cash register reports, tip reports, payroll data, everything." David paused, worry flashing in his eyes. "It's that serious?" Nathan looked directly at David, his voice low but firm. "Cassie is stealing the employees' tips. She's destroying Lone Star, destroying the people who trusted me." David sat down, opening his laptop, logging into the security system. "We're going to find everything." That night, the two men stayed up, working through the darkness. The sound of typing filled the room, the screen lighting up with fast-forwarded footage, Cassie walking past tables, slipping tips into her pocket, Cassie laughing with customers, her smile disappearing as she turned away, Cassie glancing around, her hand sweeping over tables, picking up each bill. David shook his head, his eyes red from lack of sleep. "She's been doing this like a pro. And, boss, look." David pointed at the tip reports chart. Every Friday night, the reported tip amounts drop by 30 to 40% compared to other days for the past 6 months. Nathan closed his eyes, one hand pressing against his temple, exhaustion washing over him like waves. But then he opened his eyes, determination burning within. "We're going to do 2 things. First, we back up all this data, the footage, the reports, the evidence. Second," he paused, taking a deep breath, "I'm going back to Lone Star, not as the boss sitting in an office, but to face Cassie in front of all the staff. I will get justice for Linda, for Jamie, for everyone who believed in me." David nodded, his voice firm. "I'll arrange an all-staff meeting this coming Monday." Nathan nodded softly, his eyes drifting to the window, where dawn was beginning to creep over the Houston sky. In that dim light, he saw the faces of his staff at Lone Star: Linda with her determined eyes, Jamie with her innocent hope, Marcus working tirelessly in the kitchen, and he knew a new Lone Star Smokehouse would be reborn, starting with this fight. Monday came, the Houston sky gray, heavy clouds covering the city, the air cold even though it was midday. The parking lot outside Lone Star Smokehouse was unusually full. Every employee, from cooks to servers to the young part-timers, had gathered. Inside, the tables were pushed aside, leaving an open space where everyone stood in a large circle. Eyes glanced at each other, worried, confused. Everyone knew something serious was about to happen. Linda stood at the back, gripping her apron straps, eyes cast down to the floor. Jaime beside her, holding Linda's hand, trembling. Cassie walked out from the office, holding her familiar black notebook, her eyes sweeping across the room, a cold smile on her lips. Thank you all for coming early. This meeting is just about a few policy changes. She glanced at David, who stood near the register, holding a laptop, his eyes steady. Cassie folded her arms, clearing her throat. I expect your cooperation so we can get through this quickly. The main doors opened. Every eye turned. Nathan stepped in, no longer in his baseball cap and fake beard, but in a sharp, dark blue suit. His eyes cold, but deep within them was the exhaustion of a man who had stayed up all night for justice. The room froze. Cassie's face went pale, the smile on her lips vanishing in a single breath. Nathan walked forward slowly, his eyes scanning every face. Marcus in his worn apron, Jaime with worried eyes, Linda with trembling hands but a steady gaze. He stopped in front of Cassie, looking her straight in the eyes, his voice low, clear, firm. Cassie, thank you for organizing this meeting, but I'll take it from here. Cassie regained her composure, forcing a tight smile. Mr. Brooks, I don't think there's any need for. Nathan raised his hand, cutting her off, his voice ringing clear in the room. I didn't come here to listen to reports. I came here to talk about the truth. The room was so silent, you could hear the soft whistle of the wind outside the glass windows. Nathan nodded slightly to David. David plugged the HDMI cable into the large wall-mounted TV. The screen lit up, playing security camera footage. On the video, Cassie appeared clearly, her hand sweeping the tip money off the tables, slipping it quickly into her apron pocket. Whispers rippled through the room, sharp breaths, stunned eyes. Cassie turned pale, taking a step back, clutching her black notebook tightly. Nathan never took his eyes off her, his voice ringing out, each word dropping heavy like a hammer. For the past 6 months, Friday night shifts have reported missing tip money, down by 30 to 40% each night. We have videos, we have the financial reports, and... He lifted another black notebook, a copied version of your handwritten records. Cassie. Linda raised her hand to her mouth, tears spilling over, but this time it wasn't out of fear. It was because justice was finally arriving. Cassie opened her mouth, her voice trembling. This is an internal policy to cover management costs. Nathan cut her off, his eyes sharp as a blade. There is no policy that allows you to steal the sweat and hard work of your employees. There is no policy that allows you to threaten them with false reports, to take away their dinner, to take away the money they need for medicine. He looked around, his eyes locking onto each person in the room. I was wrong. I allowed you to destroy Lone Star Smokehouse. a place that was supposed to be a home for those who needed it. Linda stepped forward, her voice trembling but clear. "Mr. Brooks, we thank you." Nathan nodded, then turned back to Cassie, his voice cold once more. "Cassie Grant, as of this moment, you are terminated, effective immediately. The police have been contacted, and you will return every dollar you stole." Cassie began to shake, her face drained of color, her lips stuttering. You can't." The sound of police sirens echoed from the parking lot, blue and red lights flashing through the window panes. The employees stood silently, watching as Cassie was handcuffed, their eyes filled with indescribable emotions: shock, relief, release. Nathan took a deep breath, turning back to everyone, his voice warm but firm. "From today, Lone Star Smokehouse will return to the values it was built on. All your tips will be returned with interest. And anyone who was forced to leave, if they want to come back, the door will always be open." His eyes met Linda's, gratitude and respect shining between them. "Linda, you will be the new floor supervisor of Lone Star. Help me rebuild this home." Linda lifted her hand to cover her mouth, tears rolling down as she nodded, her voice breaking. "I won't let you down." The atmosphere in Lone Star changed forever that day. What was supposed to be just an internal policy meeting had become the spark that reignited justice for everyone there. And Nathan knew the fight wasn't over. But today, Lone Star Smokehouse was stepping into a new chapter. After that fateful meeting, Lone Star Smokehouse fell into a strange quiet. There was no longer the fake laughter of Cassie, no more sneaking footsteps around the tables to steal the employees' hard-earned tips. Linda stood in the break room, looking at her new uniform with the bright name tag Linda Parker, floor supervisor. She ran her hand over the badge, her eyes red as she let out a soft smile, turning to Jaime, who was tying her apron, the young woman's eyes shining with relief. "Miss Linda, I'm afraid I won't do a good job today," Jaime mumbled. Linda placed her hand on Jaime's shoulder, her eyes gentle. "Today, all you need to do is be yourself. Smile genuinely at the customers, and trust that your hard work will be respected." Jaime nodded softly, a shy smile forming on her lips. But for the first time in months, there was no fear in her eyes. The first evening under Linda's supervision began. Marcus, the head chef, stood in the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron, looking out to the dining area where Linda moved from table to table, asking customers if they needed more BBQ sauce, smiling as she thanked customers for leaving tips, pride shining in her eyes. For the first time in months, genuine laughter filled Lone Star Smokehouse. Jaime ran into the kitchen, holding a $10 tip left by a customer, her face glowing. "Marcus, they said your ribs are the best in Houston." Marcus chuckled, nodding, pride flickering in his eyes. Nathan stepped into the restaurant, no longer the hidden owner, but a companion. Customers recognized him, some stepping forward to shake his hand, thanking him for the changes that had been made. An elderly lady sitting at a corner table smiled. "You brought Lone Star back." Nathan smiled back, his eyes drifting to where Linda was explaining to two young staff members how to serve customers with care. "Look customers in the eye, greet them as friends, and don't forget to ask if they need anything else before you leave the table," Linda said, her voice gentle but steady, so different from the hesitant tone she once had. That night, Lone Star Smokehouse hit its highest sales in the last 3 months, not just because there were more customers, but because people started staying longer, tipping more, feeling the warm, genuine atmosphere that had once been the soul of this place. At the end of the shift, Linda sat at the counter, counting tips with Jaime and a few others. Jaime held up a stack of small bills, her eyes bright. "Miss Linda, today I earned enough to pay my rent." Linda smiled softly, placing her hand on Jaime's. "You deserve it." "Jaime." Linda looked at her own stack of tips, the small, crumpled bills, and she smoothed them out, stacking them neatly, a warmth spreading through her chest. She knew these dollars were clean, honorable, earned by her own work, and for the first time in years, she felt no shame in counting every single dollar. Nathan watched this from afar, a powerful emotion rising in his chest. He walked up to the counter, placing his hand on Linda's shoulder. "Thank you." "Linda." Linda looked up, gratitude shining in her eyes. "No, I should be the one thanking you for believing in me." Nathan shook his head, his eyes misty. "Linda, I was wrong to think that good food was enough. It's the people who are the soul of Lone Star." Linda smiled, nodding, and together they looked out over the restaurant, where the young employees were seeing customers off with genuine smiles, where families were laughing over plates of BBQ ribs, where an elderly woman was slowly enjoying her cornbread with a satisfied smile. Lone Star Smokehouse had come back to life. And this time, it wasn't revived by marketing tricks, or promotions, or street banners. It was revived by people who dared to speak the truth, who dared to stand for justice, who dared to believe in goodness, even if they were just a 50-year-old server with aching legs. In the weeks after Cassie's arrest, Lone Star Smokehouse felt like it was breathing again. The schedule board that had once terrified employees was now posted openly, fair and without favoritism. Nathan met with Linda and David in the upstairs office, the window overlooking the parking lot that filled up each afternoon. Linda carried a stack of handwritten notes. "These are suggestions from the staff. Mr. Brooks. They're asking for a clear system to record tips as soon as customers leave." David nodded. "We can implement the tip transparency system at Lone Star. Employees will take a photo of the tip, report it instantly through the internal app, and customers can scan a QR code to confirm the tip amount." Nathan smiled, nodding. "Do it. We're not just rebuilding Lone Star, we're turning it into a model of transparency, fairness, and people-first values." On the day the new system launched, Linda guided each employee, scanner in hand, her eyes shining with confidence. "When customers leave a tip, you just take a photo, send it through the system. That way, no one can take away your hard-earned wages again. Jaime beamed. Now I can work without fear, without worrying every time I look at the register. Marcus poked his head out from the kitchen. Hey, I want that tip scanner for the customers who say my ribs are the best. Everyone burst into laughter, warmth filling the restaurant. Not just Nathan's dream when he built this place from an old BBQ truck, but the dream of everyone who believed that their work meant something. Linda turned to look at Nathan, who was signing off the end-of-day ledger, his eyes carrying the exhaustion yet peace of someone who had found his purpose. Nathan looked up, catching Linda's gaze, nodding softly with a smile. Tomorrow, we keep going, right? Linda smiled, nodding back. Tomorrow, and every day after that. Because Lone Star Smokehouse was no longer just a restaurant. It was a symbol of the resilience of people who dared to stand up when they saw something wrong. It was a reminder that kindness is not weakness, but a power strong enough to change an entire community. It was a place where every small tip became a symbol of honoring the hard work of those who served with their hearts. On a quiet evening, Nathan once told Linda, "I realize that if I don't protect the people who trusted me, then everything I've built means nothing." And Linda replied, her voice soft as a breeze, "And if it weren't for you, we wouldn't believe that justice still exists." They stood in silence, looking out at the golden glow of the streetlights, where young people were laughing and talking, where people were leaving Lone Star with smiles and satisfaction, where the tips remained in the hands of those who rightfully earned them. Sometimes, you don't need to be a CEO or a powerful leader to make a difference. Sometimes, you just need to be a Linda, who dares to speak the truth even when she's afraid. Sometimes, you just need to be a Jaime, who refuses to give up even when life is hard. Sometimes, you just need to be a Nathan, who dares to face his own mistakes and fix them. Because sometimes, change begins with a single sentence, "I can't stay silent anymore." Today, Lone Star Smokehouse is still open, still welcoming customers with the scent of BBQ, with laughter, with servers who smile genuinely, with tips placed safely in the hands of those who served customers with all their hearts. And this story isn't just about a restaurant. It is a story about all of us, about trust, about integrity, and about the choice we each face between staying silent or standing up. A restaurant can be just a place that sells food, but when it honors people, it becomes a home.